The ocean roared in my ears. But it wasn't the sound of waves crashing against the shore of my dream beach house. It was the blood pounding in my veins as I stood outside the courthouse. My hands trembled, clutching the folder of evidence that would unravel my family's betrayal. Today, I would make them face the wreckage they'd caused. And I wasn't leaving until justice sang louder than their excuses. My name is Elena Harper, and I'd spent 10 years clawing my way up from nothing. At 30, I was a self-made architect, designing eco-friendly homes for coastal elites. My pride and joy was a sleek, glass-walled beach house in Malibu, bought with every cent of my savings. It was more than a house. It was my sanctuary, my proof that I could rise above the chaos of my upbringing. My parents, Richard and Diane, had always favored my younger sister, Sophie, the golden child who could do no wrong, even when her wrongdoings piled up like driftwood. But I never imagined they'd sell my dream to save her. Sophie, at 25, had a knack for disaster. Her latest mess, a $200,000 gambling debt to a shady online casino ring. She'd cried to our parents, promising to change, and they believed her again. Instead of holding her accountable, they did the unthinkable. They sold my beach house, the one I'd poured my soul into, to cover her debts. They didn't ask me. They didn't warn me. They forged my signature on the deed, claiming it was for the family. When I found out, standing in the empty shell of my home as movers carted away my furniture, I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. The betrayal cut deeper than I could describe. My parents had always excused Sophie's recklessness, her dropped college courses, her totaled cars, her endless loans from their retirement fund. But this was theft, not just of my property, but of my trust. I'd spent my life proving I didn't need their approval, but the sting of their disregard burned like salt in a wound. I could have let it go, rebuilt in silence. But something in me snapped. They needed to face consequences, and I needed to reclaim my voice. I hired a lawyer, Amelia Cortez, a sharp-witted woman who thrived on cases like mine. She warned me that suing my own family would be messy, but I was done playing the dutiful daughter. The evidence was ironclad: forged documents, bank records showing the sale proceeds funneled to Sophie's creditors, and even text messages where my parents admitted they had no choice. Amelia built a case for fraud, emotional distress, and punitive damages. The courtroom would be my battleground, and I was ready to fight. The morning of the trial, I stood outside the Los Angeles County Courthouse, the Pacific Ocean glinting in the distance. It mocked me with memories of my lost home sunsets on the deck, sketching designs to the rhythm of the tide. I straightened my blazer, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The courtroom was sterile, all polished wood and humming fluorescent lights, but it felt like an arena. My parents sat across the room, avoiding my gaze. Sophie, beside them, looked small, her eyes red from crying. I almost pitied her. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, called the court to order. Amelia opened with a devastating summary. Elena Harper built her life from the ground up, only for her family to steal her greatest achievement to fund her sister's reckless choices. She laid out the forgery, the deceit, the callous dismissal of my rights. My parents' lawyer, a sweaty man in a cheap suit, argued that they acted out of desperate love for Sophie, claiming the sale was a family decision. The lie made my stomach churn. When I took the stand, my voice shook at first, but anger steadied it. That house wasn't just property, I said, locking eyes with the judge. It was my proof that I could be more than the daughter they ignored. They took it without a word, as if my dreams meant nothing. I saw my mother flinch, but my father just stared at the floor. Sophie's sobs echoed, but I didn't waver. I was done protecting their feelings. Amelia presented the forged deed, the notary's testimony confirming the signature wasn't mine, and emails where my parents discussed keeping Elena in the dark. The courtroom felt electric, every word a spark. By the time we broke for recess, I could see doubt creeping into my parents' faces. They hadn't expected me to fight this hard. During the break, Sophie approached me in the hallway. Her mascara streaked. "Elena, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know they'd sell your house." I wanted to believe her, but her apologies always came too late. "You knew they were bailing you out again," I said coldly. "You just didn't care what it cost me." She recoiled, and for a moment, I saw the sister I used to love, the one who'd braid my hair and share her Halloween candy. But that girl was gone, buried under years of entitlement. Back in court, my parents took the stand. My mother's voice cracked as she claimed they thought I'd understand eventually. My father was defiant, insisting they had a right to act as they did because family comes first. Their lawyer leaned hard on emotional manipulation, painting me as the selfish daughter tearing the family apart. But Amelia was relentless, exposing their lies with surgical precision. The judge's expression grew sterner with every revelation. As the first day ended, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and resolve. This wasn't just about the house Anna Maria, it was about holding them accountable for years of favoritism, for treating my life as collateral damage. The ocean still called to me, but now it whispered of justice, not loss. I left the courthouse with my head high, knowing this was only the beginning. The second day of the trial dawned with a sky as clear as my resolve. But the weight of facing my family again pressed against my chest. I'd barely slept, haunted by memories of the beach house, its open windows letting in the salt breeze, the way the light danced on the hardwood floors. Now, it was someone else's, and I was fighting to make my parents see the cost of their betrayal. In the courtroom, Amelia shifted gears, calling financial experts to testify about the value of my property and the damage done by its unauthorized sale. The beach house, they confirmed, was worth $1, $2 million, far more than Sophie's debt. My parents had pocketed the excess, claiming it was for family expenses. The revelation hit like a tidal wave. Not only had they stolen my home, but they'd profited from it. The judge's pen scratched furiously as she took notes. My mother took the stand again, her hands twisting a tissue into knots. "We didn't mean to hurt Elena," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sophie was in danger. Those people, they threatened her." She painted a picture of loan sharks and late-night calls. But I saw through it. Sophie's danger was a convenient excuse for their refusal to make her face consequences. Amelia pounced, asking why they didn't sell their own home or tap their savings. My mother stammered, admitting they couldn't bear to disrupt their lives. My father was next, and his testimony was a masterclass in deflection. "Elena's always been independent," he said, as if that justified their actions. "We figured she'd bounce back." The casual dismissal ignited something in me. I'd spent my life bouncing back from their neglect. But this wasn't a scraped knee, this was my future they'd gambled away. Amelia asked pointedly, "Did you ever consider asking Elena for help?" He hesitated, then admitted, "We didn't think she'd agree." The truth stung. They hadn't even tried. They assumed I'd say no because they'd never seen me as part of their real family. Sophie was their priority. Always had been. The courtroom felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken history. I remembered holidays where I was an afterthought, birthdays forgotten while Sophie's were celebrated with lavish parties. This trial was peeling back layers of pain I'd buried for years. Amelia called me back to the stand to recount the emotional toll. I spoke of sleepless nights, the panic attacks that hit when I saw the sold sign on my property, the betrayal of realizing my own parents valued Sophie's mistakes over my achievements. I trusted them, I said, my voice cracking, and they used that trust to take everything I'd built. The jury, a mix of stoic faces and teary eyes, leaned forward. I hoped they saw me not as a vengeful daughter, but as someone fighting for what was right. The defense tried to spin a narrative of family unity, but it crumbled under scrutiny. Their lawyer produced a letter Sophie had written, begging for forgiveness. but it felt rehearsed. Another performance in her long history of dodging accountability. When Sophie took the stand, she was a wreck, sobbing about her addiction and how she'd never meant for this to happen. I wanted to feel sympathy, but her tears felt like manipulation, a tactic she'd perfected over years. Amelia's cross-examination was brutal. Ms. Harper, when did you first learn your parents sold Elena's house? Sophie admitted she'd known before the sale, contradicting her earlier claim. The jury murmured, and I saw my parents exchange a glance of panic. The lies were unraveling, and with them, any pretense of their moral high ground. As the day closed, Amelia whispered to me, "We're gaining ground, but tomorrow we go for the jugular." I nodded, my heart pounding. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, a cruel reminder of the view I'd lost. But I wasn't just fighting for a house, I was fighting for my dignity, for the right to be seen. My parents had underestimated me, but the courtroom was leveling the playing field. The third day of the trial felt like stepping into a storm. The air in the courtroom crackled with tension, every glance between my family members heavy with unspoken accusations. I sat rigid, my hands clasped tightly, as Amelia prepared to expose the depth of my parents' deception. She called a forensic accountant who traced the money from the sale of my beach house. The numbers were damning. $200,000 went to Sophie's creditors. But the remaining $1 million was split between my parents' savings and a new car for Sophie. The jury gasped audibly. My parents had claimed they acted out of desperation, but this was greed dressed up as sacrifice. My father's face reddened, and my mother buried her head in her hands. Amelia's next witness was a surprise, my former neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, a retired schoolteacher who'd lived next to my beach house. She testified about overhearing my parents discussing the sale weeks before it happened, laughing about how I'd get over it. Her words hit me like a punch. They'd planned this, mocked my pain, and never intended to tell me. The jury's faces hardened, and I felt a flicker of hope that they saw the truth. The defense scrambled, calling a family friend to vouch for my parents' good intentions. But the friend faltered under Amelia's questioning, admitting he knew nothing about the forgery. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, and my parents' story was crumbling. When Sophie was recalled, she tried to shift blame, claiming she'd begged them not to sell my house. But text messages Amelia presented showed otherwise. Sophie had urged them to do whatever it takes to clear her debt. I took the stand again, this time to share the aftermath. I described moving into a cramped apartment. My design stalled as clients lost faith in my stability. I lost more than a house, I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. I lost the belief that my family valued me. The judge's eyes softened, and I knew I'd struck a chord. This wasn't just about money, it was about the fracture of trust that might never heal. During a recess, my father approached me, his face etched with something like regret. "Elena, we didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. I wanted to scream, to ask why they'd chosen Sophie over me again. But I just walked away. His words were too little, too late. The trial was forcing them to confront their choices, and I wasn't here to absolve them. Back in court, Amelia introduced a psychologist who testified about the emotional trauma of familial betrayal. Her words gave weight to my pain, framing it as more than just a property dispute. The defense tried to downplay it, arguing that families make tough choices, but the jury wasn't buying it. Their faces told me they understood. This wasn't sacrifice. It was selfishness. As the day ended, Amelia leaned over and said, "We're close, Elena. They're running out of defenses." I nodded, but my heart was heavy. Winning the case wouldn't bring back my beach house or mend my family. Still, I felt a fire growing inside me, a determination to see this through, to make them face the public shame of their actions. The ocean's call was distant now, but justice was close, and I wouldn't stop until it was mine. By the fourth day, the courtroom felt like a battlefield littered with the debris of my family's lies. The gallery was packed, whispers of my story spreading beyond the courthouse walls. I'd become the daughter who dared to sue her parents. And though the scrutiny burned, I held my head high. Amelia called a real estate expert to testify about the unique value of my beach house, its sustainable design, its prime location, its irreplaceable view. Ms. Harper's property was a once-in-a-lifetime asset. He said, its loss is a professional and personal catastrophe. The jury nodded, and I saw my mother wince. They were beginning to grasp what they'd taken from me. The defense tried a new tactic, painting me as ungrateful. Their lawyer argued that my parents had supported me growing up, implying I owed them forgiveness. It was a low blow, and Amelia tore it apart. She presented my tax records, proving I'd been financially independent since college, never asking for a dime. Elena didn't know them. She said sharply. They owed her respect. When I took the stand, I shared a memory that had haunted me since childhood, my parents missing my high school graduation to bail Sophie out of a shoplifting charge. I learned early that I was on my own. I said, but I never thought they'd steal from me. The courtroom was silent, the weight of my words settling over everyone. Even Sophie looked away, her usual tears absent. Amelia introduced a bombshell, a recorded phone call between my parents and the real estate agent, where they laughed about forging my signature. The agent, unaware he was being recorded, had said, as long as Elena doesn't find out too soon, you're golden. The jury's gasps were audible, and the judge's gavel banged to restore order. My parents' lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The recording was a knife to their defense. During cross-examination, the defense tried to rattle me, asking why I hadn't confronted my parents privately. I tried. I said, my voice firm. They hung up on me when I asked about the sale. They didn't want to talk, they wanted to hide. The lawyer backed off, sensing the jury's sympathy shifting toward me. In a desperate move, my parents' lawyer called Sophie back to the stand, hoping her tears would sway the jury. But her story fell apart under Amelia's questioning. Sophie admitted she'd known about the forgery and hadn't stopped it. I was scared, she said, but her excuse rang hollow. The jury's faces were stone cold, and I knew they saw her for what she was, complicit. As the day closed, Amelia rested our case. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, the weight of evidence stacked against my family. Outside, reporters waited, drawn by the drama of a daughter suing her parents. I avoided them, slipping into a quiet cafe to catch my breath. The ocean was just blocks away, its rhythm a reminder of what I'd lost but also of what I was fighting for. Tomorrow, the defense would make their final stand, but I was ready to face whatever they threw at me. The fifth day brought a shift in the air, as if the courtroom itself sensed the end was near. My parents' defense was on its last legs, and I could feel the tide turning. The gallery was fuller now, the public drawn to the spectacle of our fractured family laid bare. The defense opened with a character witness, an old family pastor who spoke of my parents' generosity and devotion. But Amelia's cross-examination was swift, revealing he hadn't spoken to them in years and knew nothing of the case. The jury's eyes glazed over his testimony was irrelevant, a desperate grasp at sympathy. Next, my parents' lawyer tried to argue that the sale was a mistake born of love. He painted a picture of Sophie as a victim of addiction, implying my parents had no choice. But the jury had seen the evidence, the forged documents, the hidden profits, the callous disregard. Amelia stood and delivered a searing rebuttal. Love doesn't justify theft. Love doesn't erase accountability. When my father took the stand again, he tried a new angle, remorse. We made a mistake, he said, his voice breaking. We'd do anything to take it back. But his words felt rehearsed, and Amelia pounced. If you're so remorseful, she asked, why haven't you offered to repay Elena or return the profits? He had no answer, and the silence was deafening. Sophie's testimony was the final blow to their case. She admitted to relapsing into gambling after the sale, using the new car my parents bought her to visit casinos. The jury's faces darkened, and I saw my mother cover her face. Sophie's apologies, once a shield, now sounded like excuses. The defense rested, but their case was in tatters. Amelia's closing argument was a masterpiece. She recounted my journey, the loss of my home, and the betrayal that cut deeper than any financial hit. Elena Harper isn't just fighting for a house, she said. She's fighting for the principle that no one, not even family, can steal your dreams and walk away unscathed. The jury nodded, and I felt a surge of hope. The defense's closing was weak, leaning on emotional pleas about family unity. But the evidence was too strong, the lies too blatant. As the jury left to deliberate, I sat in the courtroom, staring at the empty stand where my family had tried to justify their actions. I felt no joy, only a hollow ache for the parents I'd once trusted. Outside, the ocean breeze carried a faint salt tang, and I let myself imagine my beach house as it was alive with possibility. The jury would return tomorrow, and whatever their verdict, I'd already won something: the courage to stand up, to demand justice, to refuse to be invisible. My parents had sold my dream, but they couldn't sell my resolve. The sixth day was a waiting game, the courtroom heavy with anticipation as we awaited the jury's verdict. I sat beside Amelia, my nerves frayed but my resolve unbroken. The ocean outside seemed to hold its breath, mirroring the tension inside me. To fill the time, the judge allowed both sides to present final statements. My parents' lawyer made a last-ditch plea, urging the jury to consider family forgiveness. It was a weak argument, and the jury's faces remained impassive. Amelia stood and spoke directly to them. Elena Harper didn't choose this fight. Her family forced it upon her by stealing her future. Justice demands accountability, not excuses. As we waited, memories flooded back: summers spent sketching on the beach, the pride of signing the deed to my house, the gut punch of finding it sold. I glanced at my parents, their faces drawn and tired. Sophie sat slumped, her usual theatrics gone. For the first time, I wondered if they regretted their choices, not because of the trial, but because they saw me for the first time. The jury returned after 3 hours, their faces unreadable. The foreperson stood and delivered the verdict: guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the judge outlined the damages: $1, $5 million, including the value of the house, lost income, and punitive damages to send a message. My parents were ordered to repay every cent, and Sophie was held jointly liable for her role. My mother sobbed, and my father stared blankly ahead. Sophie whispered, "I'm sorry," but I didn't respond. The victory felt bittersweet. Justice had been served, but my family was shattered. The judge's gavel fell, and the room seemed to exhale. Amelia squeezed my hand, her eyes fierce with pride. "You did it," she said. I nodded, but my heart was heavy with the cost. Outside, reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing as I stepped into the sunlight. I gave a brief statement. This wasn't about money, it was about standing up for what's right. The words felt true, but they didn't erase the ache. My parents and Sophie left through a side exit, avoiding the press. I wondered if they'd ever face me again, or if this was the final fracture. That night, I walked to the beach, the sand cool under my feet. The ocean stretched endless before me, its waves a reminder that some things endure. I'd lost my house, but I'd reclaimed my voice. The verdict was a public reckoning, a story that would follow my family for years. They'd regret their choices, not just in court, but in the eyes of everyone who knew. The days after the verdict were a blur of paperwork and quiet reflection. The $1, $5 million would help me rebuild, but no amount of money could restore what my family had broken. I moved forward, not with triumph, but with a hard-won clarity about who I was and what I deserved. I rented a small studio near the coast, its windows framing a sliver of the ocean that still felt like home. My designs began to flow again, and clients returned, drawn to the story of the architect who'd fought her own family and won. The press coverage, though invasive, brought attention to my work, and soon I was fielding offers to design sustainable homes up and down the coast. The beach house was gone, but my dream wasn't. My parents sent a letter a week after the trial, offering an apology and a plea to reconcile. They claimed they'd learned their lesson, that they'd make things right. But their words felt hollow, a reaction to public shame rather than genuine remorse. I didn't respond. Sophie called once, leaving a voicemail filled with tears and promises to change. I listened, then deleted it. I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. Maybe not ever. Amelia and I stayed in touch, her fierce advocacy a reminder that I wasn't alone. She helped me navigate the financial settlement, ensuring every cent was accounted for. My parents sold their own home to cover the damages, a poetic twist that stung more than I expected. Sophie entered a rehab program, but I kept my distance. Their choices had built a wall between us, and I wasn't ready to tear it down. One evening, I walked to the shore where my beach house once stood. The new owners had already moved in, their laughter spilling from the deck I'd designed. I didn't resent them. They'd bought a house, not a betrayal. Instead, I focused on the horizon, where the sun dipped into the sea, painting the sky in shades of hope. I'd lost a house, but I'd gained something stronger, the courage to demand respect, to refuse to be erased. The trial had been more than a legal battle. It was a public declaration that my dreams mattered. My parents and Sophie would carry the weight of their regret, not just in their bank accounts, but in the story that followed them. I, too, carried a story, but mine was one of resilience, of a woman who turned betrayal into strength. As I walked back to my studio, the ocean's rhythm steadied my heart. I'd build again, not just houses, but a life where I was enough. The courtroom had given me justice, but the future would give me peace. And that, I knew, was worth more than any beach house.